Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Izabella Wentz, your thyroid pharmacist, author of the best-selling patient guide, Hashimoto is the Root Cause. I'm here today with my good friend, Dr. Alan Christianson, and we're going to be talking about something that is a big issue that affects a lot of people with Hashimoto's, which is weight gain. If you tuned into the Hashimoto's Institute last September, then you'll probably be familiar with my good friend, Dr. Alan Christianson. If not, let me tell you about a little bit about him. He is a Phoenix, Arizona-based naturopathic medical doctor who specializes in natural endocrinology with a focus on thyroid and adrenal disorders. Dr. Christensen is the author of the soon-to-be-released Adrenal Reset Diet, the best-selling Complete Idiot's Guide to Thyroid Disease, and Healing Hashimoto's A Savvy Patient's Guide. As a child, Dr. Christensen was raised in rural Minnesota, and he was a very avid reader. He loved spending time with his family's encyclopedias and medical textbooks. His body, however, was a source of struggle. Cerebral palsy left him with seizures, poor coordination, and eventually obesity. As you can imagine, a devastating comment made by a classmate in the 7th grade gym class spurred him into action. He became determined to reset his health and his life. Over the next few weeks, he devoured dozens of books on nutrition, fitness, and health, and created his own recovery plan. Dr. Christensen gave up sugar and developed an exercise routine that was easy enough for him to start on. He stuck with it and built on it. With no prior sports experience, he became a varsity football player and his class's best endurance runner by the 9th grade. This experience taught him that being healthy transformed both how you feel and how others treat you. He also learned that the tickets to health were knowledge and persistence. Dr. Christensen frequently appears on national TV shows like The Doctors and The Today Show, as well as print media like Shape magazine. When he's not maintaining a busy practice, his favorite hobbies include mountain unicycling, technical rock climbing, and watching the stars. Dr. Christensen resides in Scottsdale, Arizona with his lovely wife, Kieran, and their 2 children. So welcome, Dr. C. It's so nice to see you. I just love technology. It's great that we can be far away and feel so close together.
Across the ocean, isn't that cool? So I've got to tell you one thing about your discussion about your book. You've got to change that from now on. It's not a best-selling book. It's a New York Times best-selling book, and that's a big thing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we were very excited. The book became a New York Times bestseller, so we're very excited about that.
So whenever you mention it again, don't say it's a bestseller. Say it's a New York Times bestseller.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that reminder. I'll definitely have to use that next time. So Dr. C, that's my little dog Boomer. He says hello.
Hey, Boomer.
We keep hearing about the rates of obesity increasing. Can you tell us some of the new projections for that?
It's a crazy thing. For people really experience it individually, and we've been taught that it's a matter of just like personal blame or some disconnect between discipline, you're not trying hard enough. And then we hear these stats. So they're saying now that a little more than the next decade, that 2/3, 67% of humans on this globe, so not just Americans, but like worldwide, are going to be categorized as overweight, obese, or morbidly obese. So 2/3 coming up really quick. And those same stats, a few decades ago were under 10%. So when we see rates like that, we've got to think that this is a big thing. It's more than just willpower.
Absolutely. And I think it's more than just genetics. A lot of people will claim that it's a genetic thing. It's in my genes. I can't help it. But you've been studying this for a really long time. How much do you think genes actually control our body weight?
That's a really good question. And it's surprisingly little, but we do think of that as being one of the default reasons for it. One of the natural studies, we call those, situations that allow us to analyze a scenario that's come up, is twins separated at birth. And there was a couple of big studies of this phenomena relative to body weight. And if it was purely genetic, if it was only genes, twins with different lives should have the same weight. So one researcher found 44 pairs of twins that were adults, and they were separated at birth. And they had, of course, a lot of striking similarities. These were identical twins. So like their height and their eye color and a lot of interests or whatnot were the same. Their weight was totally different. There was like no relationship whatsoever. If you had a group of So 44 pairs, so 88 people. So if you had a group of 88 random people that were not related, their similarity of body weight was no different than it was for the twins' similarity of body weight from one to the next. So, and then another paper showed too that when you looked at the same phenomena, the heavier twin had higher measurable amounts of some of the adrenal stress hormones. So this correlates.
So interesting. And people will focus on calorie consumption as the culprit for weight gain. So is it just calories? I know you've been arguing about this. Can you explain?
Well, there's two arguments against that. One of which is whether or not it's accurate, whether or not people truly are consuming more calories. And I've had some friends that have made some good statements and some good analysis saying that maybe we're not consuming more. But my first thought is even deeper than that. Let's say it is accurate. Maybe it was. Maybe people are consuming more calories. When we see the rates of weight gain going up at unprecedented levels, we've got to step back and say, are calories an explanation or is that a description? I'm personally not a big sports fan, nothing against it, but you always hear about when a big game or an upset happens, what's the post-game analysis? Why was it that this team actually won and they got together? So imagine the post-game analysis. Yeah, the Cowboys won the Super Bowl because they scored 20% more points. It's not a very satisfying explanation of events. It's really just describing what happened. And even if the calorie model was accurate, it's a description. All it is saying, yeah, people may be consuming X amount more. But when it's happening globally, when it's happening worldwide, we've got to say, well, why would that happen? It's not, we didn't just suddenly lose willpower or suddenly gain indulgence on a planetary scale. That's not an explanation anymore.
A lot of experts will tie weight gain to poor habits. And my favorite study was, I think, one done by Coca-Cola, and it said that the reason why we have more obesity nowadays is because women do less housework than they used to. And of course, I wasn't happy about that. What do you say to all of this attention on, blaming the person that is overweight?
That's the thing. It makes me nuts. And I don't know. I remember being in this state and watching it and how frustrating it feels. But I've looked back in the history of medicine, and this has come up before. Back in the 1850s, we told people with tuberculosis that they had to get off their lazy butts and go move around, or they'd never get better. We thought it was a disease of personality, and we called it consumptive personality was the term. And we thought that it was more so like artists, more so creative types, and that it was a matter of temperament and really people that were disinclined towards being physically active. That's why they had tuberculosis. And now we laugh at that. We know that, well, yeah, they weren't doing a lot because they were sick. It wasn't that their laziness made them sick. It was the opposite. And we actually did similar stuff for leprosy and smallpox. We said, oh, people had certain traits. They didn't have the right moral fiber. And honestly, obesity, it's so huge and it's expanding so much. We really don't explain. We don't yet have good models in the public understanding. And so because of that, we say, oh, it's got to be because of their habits, their personality, just like we did for tuberculosis, as silly as that one was.
Wow. That's just so sad that people are treated that way. And then the blame is really shifted to the person for something that they're not really in control of. What do you think the most likely culprits of weight gain are?
That's it. Over the years, I've kind of realized that it wasn't just what we're told. Well, then what is it? And I'd spent a lot of time with different researchers and their work, and a lot of them are conflicting. So some will talk about our fructose intake being higher. There's a new term called obesogen, or environmental toxicants that are known to cause obesity. There's been more study about the microbiome. There's been information about how daily rhythms of light can affect us and how much sleep we're getting. So there's all these kind of competing theories, and many of them trying to have their model be the answer. But I've tried really hard to have one of them fit, and no one of them really covers all of it. Even like fructose or even the toxicants, there's exceptions. There's many cases in which that did not explain it. There's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of cases where those things do explain it, but not all. And I was spending a fair amount of time really stuck on this. I'm like, oh, geez, if it's not this one, what if it's this one? And finally, at one point, I I got clarity, and I said, maybe it's not one of these causes, but maybe all these causes share an effect. Maybe all these different things do something similar to the body that's related to this whole weight gain.
So yeah, a lot of times scientists will just focus on one thing and they're focusing on chasing that one thing and trying to figure out that, oh, this has to be the underlying cause, but it's not often that easy because it could be a multitude of things. Now, what do you think the common thread among these causes is?
Yeah, so that was the next step of thought, and it fell into place. I realized that all these different factors, they shift the body. We've kind of like, you got a car that has different gears or different settings, and our body can be in a mode of storage or in a mode of burning. We can hold on to everything, or we can generate lots of energy. We do one or the other. And all those causes that I mentioned, the common thread is that they all put us into that storage state. They all make it to where whatever we're getting, we're going to hold on to it. And storage has a few aspects to it. One of which is just physical weight gain, but another one is that fuel that we're storing is fuel that we're not burning. So we can see more fatigue symptoms from that too.
Yeah, fatigue is another big thing that a lot of thyroid patients complain with. I think something like 70% of people we surveyed. Now,
70. Wow, that's huge.
it's crazy. And then weight gain, probably about 60% of people struggle with that.
Wow. And both of those being well over half, so obviously a lot of overlap between the two of those groups.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, why, speaking in terms of adaptive physiology, why would our body be programmed to gain weight?
Yeah, good question. So it seems that in the past this had some value. Most of the things that push us in those modes are things that act upon our response pathways. And sometimes I think we narrowly think about stress as only one powerful type, the mental emotional stress. And that's a big deal. But stress is larger. There's more things to it than just what we know of in our mind and our emotions. And in our distant past, we think about stress as fight or flight. We fought off something, we ran away from it. And that's what a lot of it came down to, is physical survival. So many researchers argue now that the fight or flight response, we had more physical dangers when times were sparse for food. If we had less access to food, we had to work harder to hunt. And on the other hand, if there was less food mass, then our predators would be more apt to go after us. We were never the top choice of any predator, but there were predators to where when they had fewer choices, they would go after things that were kind of big and unpredictable like we were. So dangerous times meant there was food shortages. Our bodies adapt to stressors by preparing for famine. So that's a way in which in the past this response was really helpful. Bad things happened, food was leaner, we stored whatever we had, we were going to survive. We were going to get through those lean times. But now that same thing is triggered by a lot of factors which are not food shortages. And we're preparing for this shortage, but it's not happening, and this whole response is not serving us.
So it seemed like it was a protective mechanism almost for us to gain weight, to protect us from the famine, from the cold. Now that doesn't seem to be that handy nowadays when we've got supermarkets on every corner and plenty of food to go around. How do we turn this off? Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, part of it is certainly any factors that you know of that are disrupting your rhythms that you can control. That makes a big difference. Regular times for sleep, adequate sleep, minimizing environmental toxin load. That was one of the more counterintuitive things that I came across, was that being exposed to chemicals in your body is just like being chased by a tiger. The exact same things that go on when you're just fearing for your life, they go on when you're breathing in plastic residues, or they go on when you've got lead contaminants in your calcium supplements. These same switches get triggered. So the more we can identify and reduce the factors, the better. But also, I've argued that identifying your adrenal rhythms, your adrenal cycles, and you've mentioned this a lot in your book, and in the thyroid world, that's a big part of restoring your health is really maximizing your adrenal rhythms. So thyroid hormones can be used in a good fashion. But I've argued in the new book that this is also really the key for managing body weight, is really resetting and correcting those adrenal rhythms.
So tell us, how do adrenal hormones relate to body weight?
Yeah, so this is pretty wild. We know about the adrenals making cortisol, especially. We make cortisol and we make cortisone, and they're both stress hormones that have a long list of functions. Cortisol is very strong. Cortisone is very weak. So we've got cycles within cycles. So the big cycle is the adrenals make this stuff more so to make us wake up and less at nighttime when we're going to sleep. Now, the little cycles are that inside of our belly fat, this is so crazy, there's also conversion of these hormones. So your belly fat literally makes cortisone stronger and makes it into cortisol, and the opposite. So it's got its internal rhythm on shifting those hormones back and forth. And the data now is so strong that those who have more visceral fat have a more disconnected rhythm with cortisol. That's like the core issue behind that. We distinguish between the subcutaneous fat below the skin and the visceral fat around the organs. And the data is strong that this exploding rate of weight gain globally is more so the dangerous stuff that causes diseases. So the subcutaneous fat, one could argue, perhaps could tie into more behavior habits. But that's not the stuff that's out of control. It's the visceral, dangerous belly fat. And the belly fat is making adrenal stress hormones along with the adrenals. And the more of it someone has, the more those rhythms are out of joint with the body's central rhythms.
So it's like a vicious cycle almost.
It's a vicious cycle, and they've actually done some pretty wild studies on this. They biopsy visceral fat, and you can suspend it in a jar and keep it alive for a little while. And you can measure its rhythm. You can chemically see where its rhythm and its cycle is. And the more visceral fat that the donor had, you can check the rhythm of the fat, and it's more disconnected from the rhythm of their bodies, from their brain and their adrenal response. So it's really not a matter of like a math error, like 200 extra calories per day. It's totally a rhythm disturbance, totally a timing factor that's off.
So how do we reset this adrenal rhythm? Can diet do that for me?
That was the exciting part of the new work. And diet's always been so central for me. One thing I love too about your book is you talk so much about the value of good digestive health and diet, and really having good clarity on that. And, me and my health journey, that was like such a game changer. And I've known all along that that is what makes the biggest difference. And we've got to eat anyway. So we've got to get clarity on that. And there's so much confusion and conflict and just lack of clarity on what are the best foods. So I thought, how cool would it be if a simple diet could actually change this rhythm? So the way in which we make cortisol can be influenced by our carbohydrates, our fats, and our proteins. We call these the macronutrients, the large parts of our diet. So I built a diet that timed carbohydrates in a way that can help repair that rhythm and bring it back on track again. And we did a clinical trial about that as well.
That's very cool. And just to want to clarify, you don't recommend like severe calorie restrictions or anything else like that people have recommended, or crazy exercise routines for weight loss?
Yeah, good point. So thinking about it from this new model about weight not being a math error, not because you put too many credits and too few debits in the account. It's not that. But it's more a matter of the body's stress hormones and their response, and a survival response to famine. So when you think of it that way, it becomes obvious that food restriction is probably the worst thing you could do. And the data is so crazy strong that food restriction diets, they just don't work. And for the small percent of people that do see weight loss, pretty much all of them, 97% or more, see more weight gain than they lost over the course of the coming years. So yeah, that's exactly why those things do not work, because they worsen this deeply entrenched survival response. And same thing about exercise. It's the best thing in the world. It's actually a type of a stressor. So if it's gentle and it's something that we can tolerate and we can rebound from, our total stress resilience is great enough to function well with it. It can serve us in so many ways. But if our resilience is low and the intensity of it is much greater than we're really used to, it's not going to make things better. It's going to make that whole underlying thing worse. And the message has been all along, yeah, eat less, move more. And it hasn't worked. And this is really, I think, one of the first times we're getting a clear reason of why.
You know, it's when eat less and move more looks really, really good on paper, but try it, they actually find out really struggling. I've had a lot of clients who have said, I eat like one grape a day and I'm still putting on weight and I'm
Wow.
exercising more and I've been exercising 2 hours a day and I keep putting on the weight. But you actually did a clinical trial with your diet, which is really exciting because you took a group of people and you tried this theory on them. So then it was no longer a theory. You actually now have proof of how it works and why it works, and not just why it works, but how it works. Can you describe the results of the clinical trial? I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, it was such a cool thing. And, I had some degree of confidence going into this. I had checked first myself quite a bit. There's good ways you can measure these things in the short term in terms of just glucose and cortisol and, of course, weight pretty accurately. So I had been my own guinea pig for a while at first. And then I had some patient friends who were really struggling with blood sugar or weight, who were eager to try something different. And we saw good responses. So we made a formal clinical trial. And about 80% of those in it were women. Average age was 42. And I'm sorry, I think it was 43. It was 42 participants. Those numbers were almost the same. So I get those back and forth. So yeah, early to mid 40s, and 42 finished it. And they had had at least 3 diets in the last few years that had just not worked for them. So they had been trying stuff. They had been trying to achieve weight loss, but they were not the ones to whom it came easy. They were not the ones to where easy things worked. And I don't know where those people are, but yeah. And the other thing was that there's many things we know of that can improve our adrenal health in terms of stress reduction and sleep and detoxification. But I wanted to see what the diet alone could do. So I really encouraged this group, not to embark upon a lot of other changes, just the dietary change. And over the course of the first month, we saw very substantial waist loss. And when we get into this, we can always achieve weight loss just by eating too little food for a while, but it's really sustained waist loss or sustained visceral fat loss that we're going for. And the average was just about 2.5 inches of waist loss over the course of a month, which was really cool. The part that really lights me up was that we also saw over a 50% correction in adrenal rhythm. So as people were losing weight, they were getting more resilient. They were getting more tolerant of life stressors and more energized and enjoying more deep restorative sleep. So the opposite of the stuff that happens on normal calorie restriction.
So that's amazing. So you were able to do that with diet. You were able to help reset people's rhythms. The adrenals are such a big issue in people with thyroid disorders, and a lot of times they'll struggle with trying to rebalance them. And like you said, of course, restrictive diets can make your adrenals much more weaker, as can exercise. I know in your book you cover a lot of other ways that people can regain and reset their adrenal rhythms. Can you share a few of those with us?
One thing too, I'm really excited that I was able to share it with people in the book was really the strategic use of adaptogens. So there's so many wonderful, wonderful plants and good nutrients, nutraceuticals that help adrenal rhythms. And one thing that's always frustrated me is that I think they could be used more specific. So what I mean by that is when adrenal function is not right, there's very different patterns. As a simplification, one stage, there's an overproduction of cortisol. The other stage has very backward timing of cortisol, still the good amounts, but wrong timing. And one stage has just minimal production of cortisol. I called those stressed and wired and tired and then crashed. And their needs are all similar, but they're also very distinct. So if you're underproducing cortisol, what would benefit someone who's overproducing cortisol is not the same. So I argue that you can know where you are. And we did a quiz, and we showed that a quiz can statistically predict your level pretty well. So you can do a quick quiz, and you can know your level, the stressed or the wired, tired, or the crashed. And from that, you can get great clarity on what adaptogens and also what mind body exercises can really suit you and really move you back towards what I call thriving, or that state of just good optimal health.
Wow. Yeah, that was amazing. I really enjoyed your book and I enjoyed the quiz. I actually used it with a few people and then tested them with their adrenals, and it was pretty spot on. So I was
Good.
very much love the strategies in the book. I've used quite a few myself so far after having a big event happening in September. So I really want for bringing this information to the world and for sharing it with all of us and with our thyroid community.
My pleasure. And the beautiful thing about adrenal issues, as significant as they are, it's really not a disease. It's not something that's deep seated. It's something that really is a pattern of dysfunction. And so the cool thing is it can reset and it can really come around again. And that's a big part of health regaining. I encourage people to never really give up on the potential of them being thriving again and being resilient and energized and at the place they want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. It can definitely happen, and you can have it happen very quickly. So for people who have been struggling for a really long time with getting their adrenals back on track, I very highly recommend your new book.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm just glad to have it out there.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Christianson. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds great. Take great care of yourself, Dr. Isabella. And yeah, eager to talk to you soon.
Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.